Welcome to another episode of Branching Out with Sierra. Today we're on episode 5, focused on goals to growth, fostering intentionality wherever you are. I want to take a moment to link today's episode to the previous 4 episodes where I've really been building a foundation for the rest of this podcast. I wanted to focus first on leading yourself effectively before we shift into focus on leading others effectively. So in the first few episodes, I've spent a lot of time helping you to think about who you are, how you define yourself as a leader, or how you can work towards defining yourself as a leader. I've also talked about the importance of building resilience and being able to bounce forward from different challenges that you face. We've discussed building self-awareness and really getting to know yourself and who you are, what you value, what your purpose is, and making sure that you know these things in order to create better alignment in your life and to be more effective as a leader. In episode 4, when we talked about the Wheel of Life, the purpose of that exercise was to help us to get a better understanding of our current level of satisfaction in each area of life, not breaking life into just a personal and professional bucket, but I broke it into 8 different sections where you can really break down each part of your life and get to know where you are in comparison to where you want to be. Which leads us into today's episode. It is the final one of this series where I'm building the foundation and a focus on personal leadership development first before looking at how you can more effectively lead others. I really want to help you decide today if it's more effective for you to be someone who is goal-focused or growth-minded, because there really is a major difference between the two, and some people find it to be more motivating to focus on goal setting, and some find it to be more motivating to focus on a growth process. And so I want to kind of go through those 2 things today and give you a framework that is helpful no matter which direction you choose to go in. Because as you identify areas in your leadership, in your influence and impact that you would like to develop, I want you to have the tools and strategies that you need in order to really assess where you are in developing the skill set and measure your influence and impact. So as we dive into goals and growth today, I want to start by kind of clarifying the distinction between the two. Oftentimes when I talk to people about setting goals, there is a point of time in which you have achieved that goal. Either you have written a goal because you are trying to set a habit, create a habit and put it in place that's going to serve you well over time. And eventually you don't have to focus in on it every single day or every single month, that it just happens naturally. So once that habit is established, you've quote unquote achieved your goal, or more of an achievement goal where there is a very clear end point in the goal. So for example, if I said I'm going to run a marathon, after I've run the marathon, I've checked the box, I've completed the goal, there is a clear end point. So a lot of times when I talk to people about goals, some people love that there is a very clear end point and it's measurable for them to identify if they've reached the goal or not. And other people, that's a very stressful way to look at goal setting. It's a lot of additional pressure on them, because what if they aren't able to achieve it, or if they're not able to achieve it in the time frame they expected to, and it puts additional pressure. Then some people think of growth as being a better approach for them, because growth is an ongoing and continuous process. There is not a specific endpoint. So if you are focused on constantly growing and achieving one thing after another, right? You reach a quote unquote endpoint, and then you ask yourself, what's next anyway? I know that's always been a habit for me. It's like, okay, now I got here. Now what? I check the box and move to the next thing. What if we just focused on an ongoing process of growth? So since our topic is leadership for everyday life, focusing on continuous improvement in your leadership skills, your ability to impact and influence other people's lives. Would that make you more comfortable with the idea if we focus just on growth rather than a specific goal? I want to talk about my own kind of personal journey with goals versus growth. I know I had shared in a previous episode that I definitely have perfectionist tendencies that I've dealt with over the years. I have always felt like, for me, failure didn't happen unless I stopped trying. So as long as I was still trying, I was good to go. But if I hit a roadblock, it would be very easy for me to be judgmental of myself and think that I could have pushed through a little better. I could have done it faster. It was always very achievement focused, and it was very hard for me to kind of get through those obstacles until I built up more resilience, and until I proved to myself that each time I hit one, if I kept pushing through, I would get stronger, and then I had this new skill set that I could apply in the future. But I feel like life was always just kind of a series of check marks. It also goes along with my disc style in the way that I'm wired. I really love being able to have closure on one thing before moving to the next thing. I don't like to have tons of balls in the air all at once and feel like I'm juggling and trying to keep everything up. So the idea of goals were comforting to me because I could put them on paper in front of me, I could measure their progress, and there was a clear end point. And once I reach that, then I look at the next thing rather than feeling like it's this ongoing process and I might never make progress that I'm hoping to make. So I can actually see it from both ways. And I actually alternate my mindset between the two of them based on the type of goal I'm setting for myself. If it's something where I feel like I need a clear endpoint, it's kind of like a mark for me to, if you picture like a timeline, right? If I reach this milestone, then I've made enough progress, and then I can look at the next milestone. Think of it as a race, for example. Every time I reach the 1 mile point, okay, I check the 1 mile off and it's the next one. I almost need those milestones to feel like I'm making progress, or I get lost in the journey. So I think a growth mindset is helpful for me, but I still need milestones along the way to help me to see what I'm achieving. Just a few ideas of ways that you can shift to more of a growth orientation if that would be helpful for you. A couple of these things I know I will touch on in future episodes, but one of the ideas is just embracing change in general and knowing that every time that I make a mistake, that isn't a failure. Actually, it is something that I can turn into an opportunity or success later. And I talked about that in the resilience episode. So anytime that you can adapt to unexpected life changes, that is really going to help you grow over time. So as I mentioned, it's going to build your confidence in being able to next time handle a similar situation or obstacle. But when we embrace that change, we know that there's something to gain from it. So it's not a failure, again, in my mind, unless you stop trying. So if you're still trying, you're good to go. There was a point in time in my life where I considered failure if I made a mistake. And it's taken a lot of time to kind of get over that because, by the way, I make tons of mistakes all the time. And I couldn't feel like a constant failure. I needed to move past that. And especially going back to being in the classroom and modeling for my students that every, mistake was an opportunity for growth. I could not sit there and have the mindset that I was failing every time I would make an error. I was modeling that for them. So embracing change is very important in looking at moving to a growth orientation rather than just one goal to the next. Also, just adopting a teachable spirit. If you are making growth a number one priority in your life, you're constantly thinking about what can I do to grow through this situation? What did I learn through this situation? There's a lot of reflection that takes place. I know that I like to reflect at the end of the day as to where I grew that day. I want to be intentional about making the most of every day. And in my mind, making the most of it is influencing someone else's life or growing myself in some capacity throughout that day. So taking time to identify growth possibilities in your life, where exactly might that lead you? Is there something that, would stretch you a little bit outside of your comfort zone? Though it's uncomfortable, it's where you grow the most. So looking for those opportunities in every situation. Asking questions that help you to grow. I mean, people around you are a wealth of information. We all have different strengths and skill sets. Look at the people that you're surrounded with and think about the things that you would like to learn and grow in, and be intentional about setting aside time to ask questions of those people so that you can learn from them. I know I surround myself with other growth-minded individuals. I'm very intentional about the environments I put myself in. I think that's another great strategy in shifting to a growth mindset is if you put yourself around other people who are focused on growing and improving their lives while simultaneously improving the lives of others, I think that that is a huge motivator as well, especially if you're hitting some bumps in the road. Also, I think it's important to keep track of what you're learning and where you're growing. So whether that is, I mentioned in another episode, journaling, maybe you don't have time to specifically journal, whatever method that works for you. I actually have clients who will record an audio message of themselves at the end of a day and share what they learned that day, which I think is pretty cool. It's like creating a voice diary of all of the areas that you're growing in or your win from the day. So another way to kind of see your progress over time is to just keep track of it. I know I have a lot of friends that are really big readers, and rather than reading all these books and quickly zooming through them and then having to go back and read them later because you don't remember them, what if you took the time after reading a book to just write a 1 or 2 paragraph summary of the key points, the key takeaways from that book so that you can kind of track your learning from them and reference them at a later date. So there are many different ways that you can focus on that growth journey and monitor and track it over time so you can see how far you've come. It's another reason why I love my full focus planner system. It is a quarterly planner system, and I am able to literally look at, I have my planner from 6 years ago, first quarter, 6 years ago, right? And I can look back and see, what was I celebrating at that time? What was I doing? What was I proud of? What was I learning? And it's very interesting to see that shift over time. And what I thought was a really big deal then seems like such a small deal now. And then now I have, in my mind, much bigger obstacles standing in the way. And I have to push through them and kind of create my own opportunities again. So anyway, that's another way, is just kind of looking back and being able to track over time. And then finally, in relation to growth and learning, pass on your learning to others. So if you've learned something new, share it. I had read a book that I thought was extremely powerful, Leadership and Self-Deception. I highly recommend that book. And I was discussing with a client the other day that I thought it would be a really good read for him and actually for his team as a whole. And then he informed me that after he read it and he started to get the key concepts of it, he decided to share it with one of his kind of professional groups that he works with, and shared the book and the idea of a book study, and they love the idea. And now that professional network is reading the book together and studying it. If I had not shared the value that I saw in that book with my client wouldn't have been able to share it with his team and would not have shared it with the professional network. So I think that it's really helpful to really sit down and think about, when you're learning something new, who would benefit from it? Is there someone that would find value in it? That's why at the end of every one of these episodes, I say, hey, if you found value in today's episode, share this with somebody in your network. It's simple, copy link, share it. It doesn't take a lot of time and effort, but it could be something that they need to hear that day. So just a couple of ideas of ways that you can adopt a teachable spirit. And then making sure that you're building a love of learning over that fear of failure. I had mentioned before my fear of making mistakes. And for me, making mistakes were equated to failure at the time. But there's a lot of fear associated with doing new things. Just like this podcast I shared with you guys in the very first episode. It is so far outside of my comfort zone to sit and stare at a camera with no one else in the room for 45 minutes and try and be enthusiastic and not go back to my normal resting, face. But it's really, really hard for me, but I'm doing it every day, and I like to think I'm getting better at it every single day. But for me, I had to consider, what was it about the potential failure that was making me so fearful of everything. And I realized so many times it was what people would think of me. I was so concerned that others would see me make a mistake and think less of me because of it. And what I realized was the reverse, that if people think that I feel so highly of myself that I think I'm going to do things to a level of perfection at all times, that doesn't make me real. I'm not being authentic. I actually want to be like everyone else and have just as many faults and make as many mistakes and have as many opportunities to learn. So I've had to really rewire my brain when it comes to loving learning more than fearing the failure. And I know that others can relate to that. So those are just some ideas to help you kind of shift from being 100% obsessed with achieving goals left and right to let's just talk about the growth opportunities all around us and building off of those, tracking those, sharing those with others. Now let's move into the framework that I wanted to share with you today. So a lot of times people talk about writing smarter goals. So back in the day when I first started teaching, they were called SMART goals. And as teachers, we were supposed to write SMART goals for our lessons, what we wanted our students to be able to do and achieve based on their learning from our lesson. And over time, those SMART goals became smarter goals, but SMARTR without the E. Then they became smarter, and it just kept building. And you know that there are tons of acronyms out there. They all stand for something very similar, but also a little different. The framework that I use for setting smarter goals and focusing on smarter growth is actually the one that Michael Hyatt, the creator of the Full Focus Planner, he uses. I was certified to teach the Full Focus Planner system and Life Focus program through him. And I just kind of adopted his framework because I thought it worked really well for me. But I don't always just say smarter goals now. It's focused on smarter growth. It doesn't matter if you're applying it to one specific goal or you're looking at the growth journey as a whole. I wanted to kind of expose you to that today. So before I talk about what smarter means in this specific framework, I just want to revisit episode 4 real quick, where I was talking about the Wheel of Life. So if you didn't catch that episode, I do recommend that you go back and listen to it before accessing this one, because I really think it will help you to build off of that. So in episode 4, when I spoke about the Wheel of Life, we were measuring your current level of satisfaction in each area of life. And the reason I think it's important to do that before looking at this framework is because we want to set goals or focus on growth in the areas that were identified in that Wheel of Life. We want to make sure that when we are creating goals or creating this growth process for ourselves, that it's in alignment with everything that we've built in those first few episodes, right? The core values, the purpose statement, knowing, where you are in each area of life, what your vision is for that area of life. Is your wheel balanced? Will it roll? What are those areas that stand out and have the biggest discrepancy? So once you figure out what those areas are, you can really zoom in and you know exactly where to focus on smarter growth. So I wanted to make sure that I kind of explain the connection to episode 4. So again, if you haven't listened to that, go back. So for more holistic growth, start with the Wheel of Life. And then every single quarter when I go to set new goals for myself or look at what growth has occurred for myself and figure out what's next. Am I on the right track? Do I need to change what direction I'm kind of navigating in? I look back at that and I adjust my wheel of life quarterly. Let me talk real quick about smarter growth and what each of those letters stand for. So the S in smarter stands for specific. Whether you're talking about goals or growth, we're going to use those words interchangeably for the rest of this episode. So whether you're writing a smarter goal or you're focused on a smarter growth journey and your overall process of growth, you need to be specific, clear, unambiguous about what it is you are trying to do. So if we want to, illustrate an example for this episode even, let's say on the wheel of life, one of the areas that I wanted to grow was under financial well-being. I used that one as an example in episode 4. So you may have heard in 2024, a big focus for me is eliminating my debt associated with my medical bills from when I was dealing with my Lyme disease. And so it's very important that I'm specific about my intention that by December 31st, 2024, what I need to have paid off. What is my starting point and my ending point? I am very, very specific as to what achievement I am really working towards by writing this goal. So specific as possible. So it's not in 2024, I want to decrease my debt. That's not specific enough. What debt? Is it credit card debt? Is it mortgage? Is it a car payment? What debt are you specifically decreasing and by how much? Which goes into the M in smarter, which is measurable. I think everything can be made measurable. Some people argue that one with me, but I think everything is quantifiable. So even if you take something, I'm going to go completely off my financial well-being example. Even if you take something related to your mental or emotional well-being, I've had clients before that noticed that they were having a lot of trouble, like getting motivated to go out and do things, get out of the house, just didn't seem as happy, maybe even facing some depression. And they wanted to see what was really going on and kind of track their moods. So they literally created a system for measuring and tracking what their mood was each day so they could look for patterns in their behaviors, in their feelings, and really had the information necessary in taking action. Even that can be measurable. Everything can be quantifiable if we want to make a rating scale. Maybe that comes from my teaching background and creating rubrics for grading projects and stuff, but I think everything can be made measurable. So these are your criteria for measuring progress over time. So if my goal is over the course of a year, and I know I'm just going to, choose an easy number. If I know I want to pay off $20,000 of debt in 2024, by breaking it down in that way, then I can break down each quarter, each month, each week, and know exactly what I need to chisel away at in order to stay on track for my goal. So I know as we're approaching the end of June right now, the end of quarter 2, that I should be halfway to my goal. And if I'm not on track, that I'm going to need to make an adjustment to increase the amount of debt I'm paying off in quarters 3 and 4 to still achieve the goal by the end of the year. So this is a very measurable example, but no matter what it is, for my one client, it was, can we increase the number of days that she considered herself to feel happy and fulfilled over the course of a week? If she was only feeling happy or fulfilled 1 day a week out of 7 days, by the end of the quarter, could she get it up to an average of 4 to 5 days a week? Whatever it may be, make it measurable. The third letter, SMA, A, is actionable. So this is where you need to define the concrete steps in getting there. It's one thing to just say, this is what I'm setting out to do, but map out the clear next steps that you are going to take. So for me, if I was going to pay off all of my medical expenses by the end of the year, I needed to know where I was in all of that. I needed to collect all of my bills, get them together, get a final total. I needed to really analyze my budget and figure out how much money do I need to be bringing in to pay all of my other bills, plus make the progress on these payments that I need to, right? So I was very clear in that. I even have a reminder every single day on my calendar of how much debt I need to be paying off per day, because that daily reminder keeps me on track to make sure that I'm making the progress. It's top of mind for me. So no matter what the goal is, think about the specific actions you are going to take. I always say it's helpful to list at least the first 3 things that you're going to do, because those 3 things will help you kind of get the ball rolling. And after you have that momentum, it's usually pretty easy from there to maintain. But I think those first 3 steps are the hardest. Sometimes it's putting an alarm in your phone as a reminder to, do something at a specific time. So whatever area of life this goal is in, make sure you have defined concrete next steps to help you achieve that goal. A lot of times, and I actually just shared this in the Aspire to Achieve program yesterday, a lot of times I've found it's helpful to look at my calendar and put a specific block of time into my calendar that is set aside just for focusing on that goal or growth process. So is it I'm setting aside a certain time each month where I'm updating my budget and my bill spreadsheet, right? Or whatever that area is. Make sure you're setting aside time for it. This podcast, setting aside time every single week to record episodes, to work on the social media content and approve what Matthew has created. All of that takes time. If I am taking the time to set a goal or I'm focused on a growth process, I need to make sure that that's incorporated into my calendar, not just try and fit it around things that already exist. So we've done specific, measurable, actionable, and the R in smarter is risky. Okay, risky is here because it is so easy to set a goal that is kind of easy on you, that you can achieve, that it makes you feel successful. It's not going to challenge you. It's not going to push you outside your comfort zone. If it's easily attainable, it's easy to kind of drop it too. It's not as meaningful. So this podcast, again, is another example. Risky in the amount of time it's going to take to do it. I know it's a stretch for my already busy schedule to fit in a weekly podcast, but I'm making that happen because it's important to me, and I do believe we will make things happen if they're important to us. But also risky, and do I have the skill set to do this? Is this something that I'm going to have to develop over time? Talk about a growth process, right? There are so many different aspects that go into the creation of a podcast. Risky, you want to talk about risky for the financial goal. It is requiring a significant amount of debt to be paid off every month. And when you take a small business owner who's trying to pay personal expenses, business expenses, keep this property in Winchester, all of that, plus pay off a significant amount of debt all at once, it's really risky. And I'm really having to push this year to make it happen. But I have my sights set on it, and I have to be very clear and focused and kind of eliminate things outside of that area of focus that aren't in alignment with my goal. So push yourself. Don't do what's easy. I think it's helpful to think about good, better, and best. So a lot of my business owner friends, if they are looking at setting a goal for the amount of revenue that they want to make in a year, oftentimes the very first number that you set, it might be just like within reach. It seems pretty easy. Maybe it's similar to, the amount of revenue you brought in last year. Well, you've done it once, you can do it again, right? What if you push yourself just a little bit further? Well, that's the better. But what is the best case scenario? Because if you set your sights on best case scenario, if you miss, chances are you're still going to hit better, right? But if you set the goal at good, rather than better or best, you'll be happy if you reach good. Are you really going to push beyond that? So that's why I set it to be a very risky goal. And if I miss, I still prove to myself that I was able to do more than I probably imagined. So just something to think about when it comes to setting goals that push you. So we have specific, measurable, actionable, risky. Now the T stands for time bound. And that is just setting a timeline to make sure you're creating a sense of urgency. I know that in the Aspire to Achieve program, when my clients are making a commitment to doing something over the course of the next month, they say, hey, in the next month I want to do blank. I am making sure every single time that they're clear with me about what they're specifically going to do, what outcome I expect to see from them. But also, I want to know the exact deadline, and if I should check in on them maybe 2 weeks from now, what is the date and the time that I need to check in on you, and what progress will you be able to tell me you've made by that time? So make sure it's time bound, put a deadline on it, and push yourself a little bit there too. So it was funny when thinking about creating the podcast, when it was first brought to my attention by Matthew that I should do a podcast. I don't think he thought I was going to say yes. And when I did say yes, I said, okay, I want to roll it out next month on the anniversary of the business. 30 days. Like, of course, we can do it in 30 days. And his eyes widened a bit. I don't think that was the timeline that he had in mind, but I knew that if I set the timeline, that we would do what it would take to make it happen. But if I gave myself too much wiggle room, I would talk myself out of it. If you've heard of the 5-4-3-2-1 rule that Mel Robbins talks about, the 5-second rule, that if you need to do something, just count down from 5, and when you get to 0, just do it, because if you give yourself more time to think about it, you'll talk yourself out of it. You'll kill the idea. I didn't want to talk myself out of it. I knew I needed to commit 30 days. It's risky and it's time bound. So we made it happen because I committed to you guys too. And the moment that I said, hey, I'm doing a podcast, if I told one person about it, well, I want to follow through on my commitments. That's something I do. And so now I have to do it. So I made sure to check all the boxes so that I couldn't get out of this one. So we have specific, measurable, actionable, risky, and time bound. Now we have the ER in smarter. So the E is exciting. And that's because we want to set goals that are energizing, that are motivating, that are going to get you out of bed in the morning. If it's not something that's exciting for you, again, it'll go back to you'll talk yourself out of it. So when you are, whether you're focused on growth, and maybe if it's growth as a leader, maybe you're excited about mentoring someone at your company. It's someone that's just coming into the organization or an emerging leader, and you're excited about your ability to impact them along their journey. That's exciting. That could lead to you really putting the time, energy, and effort into achieving this growth and helping them to achieve their goals as well. But if it's something that isn't interesting to you, chances are it's going to end up on the back burner and might not even get completed at the end of the day. So make sure that it is something that's meaningful to you. I know that in the Full Focus Planner system, I love that it has a spot for you to write down your key motivations, because when you hit bumps in the road and it might become challenging to do the thing that you want to do, if you go back and read the key motivations, it reminds you why you set out to do it in the first place. So why is it so important to me that I launch this podcast? Well, I want everyone to feel as if they have the ability to impact others and that they are leaders. I don't love the fact that I didn't think I was a leader for the first 30 years of my life, and that so many others don't either. And so I want to change that. That's motivating for me. So when I'm having a moment and I don't necessarily want to get behind the camera for this, then I remember if it impacts one person, it's totally worth it. And that's all that matters for me. That's exciting. So think about your key motivations behind your goal or your growth. And then finally, the R is relevant. So how is it relevant to you on your journey? And for me, the way I check for relevance is I look at my wheel of life. So how does this podcast, how does the paying off the medical bills, how does that connect back to my wheel of life and help me to grow in the areas that I noticed there was a discrepancy that are preventing my wheel from being balanced and rolling? And if there's not a direct connection, then it's not time for me to do that thing. So I knew that the professional growth side of my life needed some more attention. So this was in alignment. I knew the financial well-being part of my wheel of life needed attention for me to be able to reach my other milestones, purchase a house, do all the things I want to do. That is a reason why that goal was set for this year. So just make sure that these goals or the growth process in front of you is in alignment with your life priorities, with your purpose, with your core values, and all of the things that we've talked about in previous episodes. So that's the framework of smarter goals or smarter growth. Specific, measurable, actionable, risky, time-bound, exciting, and relevant. So what I want you to think about is what works better for you. Do you prefer to focus on goals and set and achieve one goal at a time or a few goals at a time? Or do you like to look at your entire growth journey as a whole and just be more growth oriented and feel like you're always making some sort of progress over time? And I mentioned to you, I really alternate between the two. It's not always just focused on goals. It's not always just focused on growth. I feel like some areas of my life, I just need to see continuous growth, and others, I have to have those clear milestones. So think about which is a greater motivator for you. And no matter which one it is, how can you use that smarter framework that I was just talking about? How could you use that to more intentionally kind of navigate life and make the changes that you need to, head in the direction that you need to, personal life, right? And having a professional impact as well. So that is what I wanted to cover today, really shifting from a strict focus on goals to embracing continuous personal and leadership growth. I do always like to share a challenge with you. So the Branching Out Challenge for this week is just that. I would love for you to take one of the areas from your wheel of life, if you did that exercise, and just focus in on that area in writing either a smarter goal or a plan for smarter growth in that area. I'd love to hear from you and hear exactly what area you chose. I would love to be able to look at it and make sure it meets all the smarter requirements, help you to kind of modify it if it needs more detail or specificity. I'm happy to help you with that. So always feel free to submit those things to me for feedback, and I will be happy to share my thoughts with you. So if you found value in today's episode, as always, please share it with someone else. I would love if you would subscribe to Branching Out with Sierra so that you get updates when these episodes come out every week. Now, it doesn't just come out to Spotify on Friday, it's also coming out to YouTube on Friday, so the video version of it on YouTube as well. And then everything else will come out after midnight on Friday. So on Saturday, it will be accessible on all other platforms. Just kind of a look ahead. I had mentioned that the first 5 episodes were just me writing solo, and then I will start having guests. So I'm very excited that I actually have the next 8 guests secured, and their recordings are on the schedule. I already have topics and themes and questions in the back of my head, and I'm very, very excited about that. So you can look forward to the next episode, having a guest in this room with me. Believe me, I look forward to it too, so that I can have a conversation with someone and make sure that this is engaging and relevant to your life as well. Thank you so much for sticking around for this entire episode. If you've made it through with me, I appreciate you taking the time out of your already busy life, whether you're in the car right now, in the shower, out on a walk, wherever you are. You took time to be here, and I appreciate that. And I'm impressed with the fact that you value your own growth enough to take the time to intentionally listen to these episodes and try and apply these concepts to your life. If there's anything that you think that I could be doing better, please let me know. I want to hear from you. There are lots of different ways to get in touch. You can go to branchingoutpodcast.com. There is information on the podcast there. You can subscribe directly from that page. There's a spot if you would like to be a guest on the show. You can submit an application to be a guest. You can also fill out a contact form, shoot us a message at info@branchingoutpodcast.com. Follow us on social media. I'm still trying to get our number of followers up to 1,000 followers on that Branching Out with Sierra Facebook page. At the time of this recording, we're at just about 500, so we're about halfway there, and we'll keep working at it. So if you could invite your friends list, I'd love to have them join me on this journey. And I look forward to being back here with you next week for another episode with my guest. I do want to kind of close with a quote for you that I thought was in great alignment with what we were talking about today. So this is from Abraham Maslow. If you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's from Abraham Maslow, the creator of that. And it says, one can choose to go back toward safety or forward toward growth. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again. And I think that is so true. Every single day we live it. The things that are uncomfortable, that we are fearful of, as soon as we do them and we don't retreat towards safety, but instead we continue to proceed and push through forward, that is toward growth, toward great opportunities. So I love that quote from Abraham Maslow. And until next time, friends, keep branching out.